We're at the point in the season now where a lot of the MVP narratives are starting to take shape. Guys are starting to make clearer and clearer cases for why they deserve to win it. And as we've gotten further into the season, I've become less and less certain on who I'd pick to win MVP. Originally, this video started out as a different video where I was going to try and make the case for why this certain player deserved to win the award. I won't say who it was, but as I got further and further into the video, the more I realized that there's a lot of different factors at play for this year's MVP that makes it really, really difficult to pinpoint who should win it, who I would pick to win it, and predict who's going to win it. There are three players right now that are kind of the frequent flyers in the conversation. It's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I know there are other guys who are getting mentioned in the discussion. These three guys are in the top three according to the NBA's official MVP ladder, so I'm just going based off of that. Some people think that the MVP award should go to the best player on the best team in the NBA. This isn't always the case because you look at last year, the best team in the NBA was the Boston Celtics, and Jason Tatum didn't win MVP, so it's all very situational. Now, some people think that the MVP award should be a lot more literal. How valuable are your individual contributions to your team's success, even if your team isn't the most successful team in the NBA? And then other times, the MVP award is a lot more narrative driven. What is the story behind you and your team's success? I think a good example of this would be Russell Westbrook in 2017. And I'm not saying that Russell Westbrook didn't have a statistical case to win MVP. It's more so the fact that the Thunder were the 6th seed that season, which is very, very, very unusual for MVPs. It's so unusual, in fact, that Russell Westbrook and Nikola Jokic are the only MVPs in the last 40 years to win MVP while not being on a top 3 seed or higher. You look at the overall package, though, of Russell Westbrook's MVP. He averaged a triple-double for the first time since Oscar Robertson. He set the record for most triple-doubles. And the other factor that I think people kind of gloss over when talking about this MVP is the fact that this was the year after Kevin Durant left Oklahoma City to go join the Golden State Warriors. And Russell Westbrook kind of dragged that team to the playoffs after KD's departure. So yes, he had the statistical case, but the team success wasn't there like it normally is. But again, sometimes the narrative is a factor. Whether it should be or not is something that people are going to argue about till the end of time, but it's a factor at the end of the day. So this leads us into the big question. Is Shai the MVP? Is Jokic the MVP? Is Giannis the MVP? Now, in order to answer this question, we're gonna have to take a look at some numbers. Now, I know some people really don't like it when you bring up numbers in an MVP conversation, especially when you bring up advanced stats. And I'm going to avoid using a ton of advanced stats and stuff like VORP and win shares per 48. I am, however, gonna look at these guys' box scores, comparing them, and I am gonna use on-off numbers. Now, on-off numbers are not advanced stats. On-off numbers would probably fall more under tracking data, and we're gonna try and use as much context as possible. Let's start looking into some of these numbers for these guys. Shai is number 1 in points per game this season with 32.1 points per game. He's number 2 in true shooting percentage among 30 point per game scorers. Among the 3 30 point per game scorers, which also just so happen to be the MVP candidates, he's the only one recording 3 stocks, which is steals plus blocks per game. Now let's move on to Jokic. Jokic is averaging 30 points per game, which is 3rd in the NBA. He's shooting 47.4% from 3 on 4.3 attempts per night. He's averaging 13.1 rebounds and 10.2 assists. And then we have Giannis. He's averaging 31.5 points per game, which is 2nd in the NBA. He's got an overall efficiency of 62.7% true shooting. He's averaging 12.2 rebounds and 5.9 assists. And his mid-range game has been a major factor this year, and one of the reasons why his scoring has reached this height. I think statistically, all of these guys have MVP caliber numbers. And there's also the factor of role at play. Jokic is a center, Giannis is a power forward / center, and they operate very differently than Shai operates, where Shai is doing the bulk of the scoring for the Thunder, and he's not necessarily relied on as much for his facilitation and being an overall offensive engine outside of just putting the ball in the hoop. Giannis and Jokic operate in a more heliocentric way, where Jokic is doing a lot of facilitating out of the post, drawing double teams, kicking out the shooters, stuff like that. Giannis is kind of oscillating between a bunch of different roles where, yeah, sometimes he's going to be bringing the ball up the floor and running pick and rolls. Sometimes he's going to be posting up. Sometimes they're just using him as a dominant force in transition. So the numbers are a result of their roles. Now, things start to get really complicated when you look at the on-off numbers. But before we get into those numbers, I want to take a quick second to thank the sponsor of today's video, SeatGeek. I've been trying to find the best deal on tickets for when the Thunder play the Timberwolves in February, and that's why I'm excited to thank SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video. SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. I've been able to go to multiple Vikings games over the years using SeatGeek, and I just bought tickets to see the Thunder play the Timberwolves later this February. SeatGeek puts all the tickets from across the internet into one place so that you can be sure you're getting a good deal. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so look for the green dots to make sure that you're getting the best deal possible and you can avoid the red ones. And you know I came through for you guys. Use my code AlexHoops for $20 off your tickets at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code AlexHoops. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app. Thanks again to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to it. So far this season, when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is on the floor for the Thunder, they are plus 16.6 in net rating. They have a 121.5 offensive rating and a 104.9 defensive rating. With him off the floor, their net rating drops to 3.7 overall. They have a 108.1 offensive rating and a 104.4 defensive rating. This is an on-off swing of 12.9, which is the 6th highest in the NBA right now. Now let's look at Giannis. Milwaukee, when Giannis is on the floor, is plus 5.4 in net rating, 118.8 offensive rating, 113.4 defensive rating. With him off, that drops to minus 2.3 overall, 111 offensive rating, 113.3 defensive rating. That's a plus 7.7 on-off swing, meaning they are 7.7 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor versus off. Now we move on to Jokic. With Jokic on the floor, Denver is plus 12.8. They have an offensive rating of 127.6 and a defensive rating of 114.7. With Jokic off the floor, Denver drops to minus 13.5 overall. They have an offensive rating of 103.2 and a defensive rating of 116.7. That is a plus 26.4 on-off swing, which is the highest in the NBA. Now, what does all of this mean? It means that the Nuggets are terrible without Jokic on the floor. They are worst team in the NBA level bad. Their net rating with him off the floor is on par with the Washington Wizards, who are minus 13.9 in net rating this year. Yet when Jokic is on the floor, they're on par with the best team in the NBA. Now you look at OKC. OKC is still good without Shai, but they're definitely at their best when he's on the floor. They're plus 16.7 when he's on so far this season, which is higher than their current net rating of plus 12.3. Now you look over to Milwaukee and Giannis. The Bucks are just a regular level of bad when he's not on the floor. It's not like they completely fall off a cliff. It's more like they just kind of fall off of a hill. And when he's on the floor, they're on par with a pretty good team. This is where we kind of have to start looking at supporting casts. This is where I look at the current landscape of the MVP race and I see, okay, the top 3 candidates, Shai, Jokic, and Giannis. Now, Giannis has been putting up numbers that are ridiculous. I don't want to take anything away from what he's been doing this season. But if I had to narrow things down a little bit right now, based on where the Bucks are at, based on how the Bucks have performed so far this season, I would say right now he's the odd man out. That being said, there's still plenty of time for him to mount a convincing case over the next few months to end up snatching the MVP from the other 2 guys that we're talking about. Let's pivot over to Jokic and Shai. These guys are really the inverse of each other in terms of their rationale for why they should win MVP, especially when you look at the team success. Shai is the best player on the best team in the NBA. He's putting up MVP caliber numbers. There's no 2 ways about it. But does a player become less valuable in the context of the MVP discussion if he has an amazing supporting cast around him? All of that is to say, is Shai this good because OKC is this good, or is OKC this good because Shai is this good? Now, in my opinion, I think Shai is a major reason why the Thunder have had so much success this season. But the Thunder don't fall off a cliff when Shai leaves the floor like the Nuggets do when Jokic leaves the floor. And that would be the argument that I think comes up when people say that Shai is the MVP, even though the record indicates that he's deserving of MVP, the individual stat line and production indicates that he's deserving of MVP, his on-off numbers indicate that he's deserving of MVP. But then you go and you look at what Jokic is doing. And yeah, the record isn't on par with what the Thunder are doing. The Thunder are putting up a historic record right now in a historically competitive Western Conference. But There's no denying that the Nuggets are a putrid team when Jokic isn't on the floor. They're awful. Yet when he's on the floor, they're one of the best teams in the league. And that's not even to mention the fact that he's averaging a 30-point triple-double. And then you also have the fact that Shai is a more active two-way player. Like I said, he's the only guy of these three that's averaging 2 steals and a block. That's insanely impressive for a guard to be doing, to average a block per game while also shouldering the offensive burden that he has. But this is really my point here. One of these guys isn't going to win the award. Jokic is averaging a 30-point triple-double with a team that is certainly less than ideal. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the most efficient 30-point per game scorers we've seen since Michael Jordan, and the Thunder are on pace to be the #1 seed in the Western Conference by a mile. And one of those players is not going to win MVP. This is truly a case where, yeah, both guys deserve to win the award. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a little bit different than what I normally do. It wasn't film breakdown stuff. It was more just kind of me giving my thoughts on something that I thought was interesting. I know there's going to be a lot of disagreements about a lot of the stuff that I said in this video. All I ask is that let's keep it civil in the comments. I also really like all 3 of these players, so just try to keep that in mind. Really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe and leave a like if you did. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.